Hello, friends. We are back in satERdate with again for episode 7. Today is a very, very special day that Yusefa and I could not sleep well for the past 1 week because today we will have two superstars in extensive reading world.
Yes, Bu Uke, and our first superstar is the founding father of extensive reading. His work has greatly contributed to the development of extensive reading around the world, and he has published 2 essential books on extensive reading. I'll give you some time to guess who he is.
And while you are guessing, the second superstar is the kindest and the friendliest scholar and Facebook friend. I believe many of you already know who he is. Okay, Bu Yusefa, let us greet them. Mahalo, Professor Richard Day.
Hey, mahalo, aloha.
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 And hello, Dr. Willy Renandya.
Aloha back to you.
Okay, wow, it's really special. It's really a special day. How is Hawaii, Professor Richard?
That's fine. We're under a stay at home like most of other places, but it's very nice. The weather's like, as you can imagine, very pleasant and nice. It's some people call it paradise.
Paradise.
It is.
Right.
Yes. What about in Singapore, Dr. Willy? Shining brightly?
It's the same thing. It's a smaller paradise compared to Hawaii. Yeah, we are also staying at home, and the government starting today is relaxing the advisory a little bit, so people can go out, but still they'll have to keep the usual measures of keeping distance from other people. But things are looking good now.
Good.
Oh, that's great.
Good.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Willy Renandya and Professor Richard Day. Professor Richard, many people say that you are the founding father of extensive reading. Why extensive reading? And why do you decide to work on extensive reading?
Good question. I don't think I'm really the founding father of extensive reading. It really began a number of years ago. But anyway, I got involved in it accidentally. I was on a sabbatical leave from the University of Hawaii, and I was teaching English part-time at a university in Japan. And I was teaching high school seniors English. And it was one of these all skills sort of courses, as you can imagine. And I was focusing a little bit on reading because I thought it would be very important, because we know that reading influences writing, etc. And the material that we're using as a teacher, or in Japan as a sensei, I found it boring and I didn't like it. And I could tell my students just didn't enjoy it at all. So I kept thinking, why is it? I love reading. What's going on here? What's happening here? And then I sort of thought to myself, see, I'd never heard of extensive reading. And then I thought to myself, well, what if I gave them material that they would enjoy reading, like fiction, easy stuff to read? And I kept thinking about that and said, hey, let me try it. So to make a very long story short, I went to the principal of the school, got some money to buy some material, bought it, and handed it out on a Friday afternoon. And actually, I didn't hand it out. I put it in the front of the room and said, here are some things that I want you to read over the weekend. So pick one book, and they were all graded readers. And I said, pick one book that you think you would like to read over the weekend and make sure it's easy. So I gave them a few minutes in class before they left class, maybe 10 minutes to read. And if it wasn't easy, I told them to get another one, because I figured if it was hard, they wouldn't enjoy it. It just had to be easy. So Monday came, right? And there I'm waiting in the room, nervous as can be, wondering what in the world is happening with these students, what will come in. And there's something that I will never forget. The first student in the room was a young lady, and she was waving her book in her hand as she came in the room with a big smile on her face. Sensei, sensei, I read a book. Whew. I thought, this is it. So that's how I got involved in it. That was my interest. So I started to investigate it more and ended up getting into it. But if it hadn't been for that sabbatical and that moment in my teaching, and then that young lady waving that book, who knows? Okay, does that help? Does that sort of answer?
Yeah.
Richard, when was that? Because in 1987, I was in Hawaii taking a course on reading from you.
Yes.
that you co-taught with Jack Richards.
Yes.
You did not mention much about extensive reading back then. So when was this? When you did your sabbatical in Japan? Was it after 1987?
Yeah, I'm trying to think when it would have been, because my daughter was with me, and she was in what they call yochien. This is kind of a kindergarten.
Mm.
And so she would have been about 4 or 5, and she was born in 1985. So my guess was it probably would have been about 1990-ish.
Okay.
Somewhere in there,
Yeah.
after you had gone.
I think
Yeah.
so, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Okay. Prof. Richard, so whenever we conduct extensive reading workshops and introduce your 10 principles of extensive reading, the participants usually ask, why is it 10? That I told them that I would ask you when I meet you. Now that you are here, why 10?
Good question. Good question. Okay. Now, I co-authored both those books you referred to with a colleague named Julian Bamford. And Julian at the time was a professor in a university located near Tokyo. So when we got together and we decided to put together a book on extensive reading, we wanted to know, what did successful extensive reading programs do that made them successful? Now, this was before we had internet and going by email and all that. So we got a hold of as many programs as we could find out that we thought were extensive reading, even though they may not have been called that. We just figured it out, got a hold of them. And then from the correspondence with these different programs, we put together these, what we called first, characteristics of successful ER programs. And then we just decided to rank them, just in no particular order, but just what we thought was really important. Okay? And then we were inspired by an article by a guy named Williams in the ELT Journal, in which he called I can't remember the exact title of it now, but it was like 10 principles for teaching reading or something like that. And it wasn't about extensive reading. It was just about a regular basic reading program in EFL. So based on that, we sort of looked again at our 10 characteristics and decided we would call them 10 principles for extensive reading, an analogy to Williams' 10 principles for reading. And we did it with the idea that this would spark people who were involved in extensive reading to look at what they did and compare them to our, quote, principles, unquote. But we didn't want them to be ironclad, if you know what I mean. In other words, you've got to, or it ain't extensive reading, you know. But we put it out there to get everybody thinking about what they were doing. And I think it's worked so far.
Mm.
Well,
plus, of course, 10 is a good number.
Yes.
9 is
Yes.
not.
Yeah.
10 is a good number. It's easier to remember as well. But Richard, if you look back and if you reflect on those 10 principles, now And if people ask you, Richard, what would be 3 of the most important principles? Again, 3 is an easier number, for people to remember. So
The
what
top
would be
3?
Yeah, the top 3.
Okay.
So without these 3 principles, it won't be called extensive reading.
Okay, good question, Willie. Let me give a quick amount. I've given some thought to this over the years, but I think one of the things, at least the top 2 come off of my mind, to cross my mind, is that the material has to be easy. I think if it isn't easy, the students aren't going to do it, right? I mean, we will do things that we have to do if our teacher tells us, or our boss or our boyfriend or girlfriend tells us we got to do it, we'll do it, but we might not enjoy it. But if it's easy, yes. So I would say that the material has to be well within the student's linguistic proficiency level. Now, the second thing is, I think, for me, is the learners have to choose what they want to read. Because what is easy and interesting for Yusefa may be totally boring and too hard for Lanoka. Okay? So I think first the material has to be easy. Students have to choose it. Now let me think for number 3.
What about the teacher? The role of the teacher, is that
Well,
in any way?
Yes, and that is important, but not all extensive reading programs that do well. Our 10th principle, let me think, is the teacher is, what the heck is it?
Is a model.
I'm trying to think if that's number 10 or number 9. Oh, number 9 is the teachers orient and guide the students. And number 10 is the teacher is a role model.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Good that you remember.
Yes. Yeah. So not all extensive reading programs have that. So so we've got, what I think is important is that reading is individual and silent. I think I would put that as number 3, because if the students have to stand up and read aloud, sort of like traditional reading, it's, the pleasure, the joy goes out when they've got to do that. But if they're sitting there reading it silently, something that they chose and it's easy, then they're going to probably keep on reading most times. Okay, so I think right off the top of my head, I'd have to go with those 3.
Okay. All right. Well, now it answers many participants' questions, actually, many Indonesian participants' question. Why 10? Okay. And we also learned the 3 top or the 3 most important principles that
for me, for Willy, they could be very different.
Let me just comment on the first thing that you mentioned about the materials who have to be easy. Now that concept, easy, is not easy to get across to many teachers. What they say, what they've been saying is that if the materials are easy, what do they learn? What do the students learn?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if people ask you that question, what would usually be your answer?
Okay, I tell them this. Actually, it's sort of a 2-part reply. I say, how do we learn to read? Whether it's your first language, your second language, your 10th language. And there's usually sort of silence and they think a bit. And then I said, the answer is easy. It's a 2-word answer. And the first word is by. And the answer then is by reading.
By
reading.
By reading.
So when the students are sitting there reading, what are they learning to do? Read.
Yeah.
And then they sort of thinking,
So that's how to convince the teachers then, Pak Willy.
Yes. And actually, I think your point was well taken, Willy, that teachers may feel, gee, they're just sitting there reading easy material. They're not learning, okay? In addition, a lot of people unconsciously or whatever, because of their personalities, become teachers because they like to be in control. They like to be at the front of the classroom running the class. And when you're engaging in extensive reading, you're not doing that. You're giving autonomy, freedom to the students. Some teachers just can't do that. They get, I'm not teaching, you know, they think.
Yes, for many people, teaching means talking. Teaching means
Yes.
Explaining, right?
One
Yes.
whole hour explaining
Yes.
about things that the students may not understand.
Right.
That,
right.
yeah, that is going to take quite a bit of time to convince.
Oh, it is. It is. That it's a real challenge for teachers. No question about that.
Mm. So I like what you've been saying about no pain, no gain, because in some places, you know, the culture is such that, you know, learning will have to be seen as something that is difficult, that is challenging.
Yes.
And you have to experience a lot of pain in order to learn something.
Right. Right. Right.
But that apparently doesn't apply, you know, according to your principles. When we talk about language learning, learning should be easy. Language learning should be fun and enjoyable.
Yes. 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 So it's kind of like this idea. Something else just came into my mind. Sort of towards the end of the second semester, I had introduced extensive reading into the first semester. And then the end of the second semester, one of the top students in the class came to see me, and she had a book that she had just finished reading. And it was a series it was a graded reader originally written for English readers, L1 readers. And this was like, I think, graded reader 2 probably. And in the library that I had a graded reader, I believe it was 4, by the same author. And she had found that book and came into me and she said, "Sensei, this is much higher than I am now, but I really like to read it because I really like the first book I read by this author." And I do that. And what did I tell her? Yes, go ahead. If you're interested in it, give it a shot and give it a try. And she came back about a week later, said, "Well, I didn't understand a lot of vocabulary, but I really enjoyed it." And she thanked me for allowing her to read this hard book, but she really enjoyed it. So this easy we should be a little flexible, if you know what I mean.
Now that's an excellent point, Richard. And I would like to relate that to one of your principles, which is reading a variety of materials.
Yes.
So there are two sides. On the one hand, students may prefer to stay with the same, you know, topic, with the same text types, with the same series, if you like.
Yeah, the same genre.
Hand, the same genre. But on the other hand, you mentioned that eventually our goal is to get the students to read a wide variety.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, good point.
Okay, Prof. Richard, now talking about your first book, which titled is Extensive Reading in the Second Language Classroom, which was published in 1998.
1998, right.
So what was your main goal when you were writing the book?
Great question. Thank you. Our goal was to write a book on extensive reading that would be easy and interesting for English teachers to read and understand. It was not written for researchers. It was not written for academics or professors, but for practicing language teachers, whether ESL or EFL. That was what was going on. That's just what we were trying to do. And I will tell you that we agonized over paragraphs, over sentences, to make sure that our target audience could understand it. And you read the book, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Was it easy to read? Was it hard to read?
Yeah.
It's easy to read and
Yes,
very
yeah,
informative,
yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah.
We do have one here in Ohio State University Library too, and I found it last
Oh,
time.
good. Good.
I bought the book when it was published in 1998, and I read the book in a couple of days, and immediately I wrote a book review, and I got it published in the RLC Journal. And I got a lot of credit for writing that book review because Google Scholar apparently mistook my book review as the original book that you wrote. So I got something like 2,000 citations.
Wow.
Book review.
For a book review, Willy. I didn't know that.
Wow.
So it's a welcome mistake, basically. It's really,
Good news.
it's really a book that I enjoyed reading, and I've reread the book several times actually, and that is one book that I would recommend to anyone who want to know more about extensive reading, especially from the conceptual understanding of what extensive reading is, and the theory behind it, and what teachers can do to implement extensive reading in the classroom. So it's a highly recommended book. Second edition coming soon?
I haven't heard from, actually the paperback is out of print now, as I understand it. Well, so it's only the hard copy. Yeah. And I don't know, I know, Will, you probably know this, but Julian and I do not get any royalties or any money from the book.
Oh dear, wow.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No. I knew some of it. You donated the royalties to the Extensive Reading Foundation.
Yes, the money all goes, the royalty checks from Cambridge go right to the Extensive Reading Foundation. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, wow. So
that's your contribution to humanity.
It's contribution.
So so listeners, para pendengar di Indonesia, jadi ini tadi saya mau menggarisbawahi bahwa Profesor Richard Day mendonasikan royalti dari buku yang beliau tulis itu untuk Extensive Reading Foundation. Yeah, so wow, it's amazing. Okay, I'm speaking Indonesian to let some Indonesian teachers know.
About, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
About your making donation from the royalty to Extensive Reading Foundation. Thank you. All right. So, Pak Willy, just now you mentioned a little bit about how useful Professor Richard Day's first book is. But now, would you please tell us more specific, like how influential is Richard Day's book towards the development of extensive reading?
Well, first thing, for me personally, that book changed my life. Seriously. Well, that book, was responsible for the subsequent, academic work and also interest in writing and doing research in language education. So since that time, I've been working, I've been writing, I've been researching extensive reading, and I've been sharing the ideas with a lot of teachers.
Yes, he has.
In Indonesia and also in many parts of the world. So it's a very powerful book. The thing that made the book really relevant for me is because I had a personal experience learning English mainly through extensive reading. But back then, I did not have the theory to support, the way I did, learn English. So when I saw that book, I became, wow, this is everything that I needed to know. That helped me understand my own experience as a language learner. So I was so happy when I saw that book. So it's always been on the top of my list. And one particular chapter of that book that I like the most is the chapter on motivation.
Oh, I was just thinking that, Willy.
Secret garden or something, the secret garden of motivation. It's about the, how people become interested. And I think he spent time explaining a theory that makes a lot of sense to me. I still remember the theories: expectancy, value, theory of motivation.
Yes.
Excellent theory, easy to understand, and it's highly applicable for people who want to learn English.
Yeah. You know, it took me quite a time. I did a lot of research on theories of motivation. And I went through, I can't remember how many until after I went through a bunch, I gave up and I said, the really one is the expectancy plus values. I said, educationally, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm glad to hear you, Willy.
Yes, it does. Yes.
Yeah.
Pak Willy, another related question to your own experience of using Richard Day's book. In your opinion, how can this book be the guideline to implement extensive reading for teachers in Indonesia?
I think the book is an excellent resource for teachers to have the initial and complete understanding of what extensive reading is about. But when it comes to implementation, I think people may want to refer to the guidelines published by the Extensive Reading Foundation.
Yes.
I think there's a nice little practical guidelines. It explains things in a way that is easy to follow and understand for teachers, how to select materials, how to provide or to choose after reading activities and the rest of it. So that practical guidelines, I think, is more practical for teachers to use. But for those who want to have a bigger picture of what extensive reading is all about and how it relates to the whole process of language learning and language acquisition, Richard Day's book is #1, a must-read book. Definitely.
Yeah, but I like the reference to the ER Foundation's website. I think those guidelines are really good, Willy. Good.
So after you wrote the first book, then many people took so many benefits on that, and you continue to write your second book, right, Professor? So what inspires you to continue writing and then publish your second book, which is published in 2004, The Extensive Reading Activities for Teaching Language?
Yes, because I did a lot of work with extensive reading, talking, workshops, and teaching it myself. And then I learned over the couple of years I was really involved in it, that there are things that we can do that extends extensive reading from learning to read to learning the target language. So that's what inspired that, to say, okay, let's move beyond reading class and move to teaching in L2, a second language or a foreign language. So that's what happened there. And that moved a bit away from another one of the first characteristics or the principles, that is, reading is its own reward. And we formulated that because we found when we reviewed these successful programs that generally they did not have comprehension questions or book reports. So that led us to formulate that reading is its own reward. You don't have to have a book report due or answer comprehension questions. Then I would ask teachers, when you read a very interesting novel in your first language, do you answer comprehension questions? And usually profound silence, and they all, well, that would be stupid. Yes, it would be. So what do you do? And often they would reply, well, we might tell a friend, we share it, we get another book by the same, that sort of thing. So this sort of idea got behind it. And then once we got into it, we discovered all kinds of things that students could do with what they have read and enjoyed, and then do it and really enjoy it. It was because, you know, when I tell teachers this, they laugh. I say, you know what? Students hate to write book reports. And they all go, yes, that's right. And I also, teachers hate to read them. Say, yes, after the first 4 or 5, it's terrible. Yeah, so don't do book reports.
Okay, But then again, back to another challenging thing is the reality or the fact that teachers also have to assess the students' learning, Professor Richard. So could you give us some free tips, like on how to best implement extensive reading in their classroom without maybe not worrying about assessment or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I have done, and I think a lot of people have done it, is try to determine the number of pages or books or hours that students have done reading the material. And then what they do is, at least this is what, for example, when I with a colleague introduced Japanese at UH, at the University of Hawaii, second semester Japanese, we introduced it into the Japanese class, and it was not a reading class, it was again the 4 skills. And we devoted 15% of the final course grade to extensive reading. And we said, if you read X number of books, you will get 15. If you read slightly less than that, you will get 14 or 13 or 12 or 10, that sort of thing. So they weren't getting assessed on what they read, but they were getting credit for what they read. And then to make sure that the students really were doing the reading that they reported in their journals and that they understood it, we did a bunch of extensive reading activities every Friday morning. We would spend about 20 minutes doing extensive reading activities. And if students haven't read and understood the books, they can't do the extensive reading activities.
Yeah, that's so practical, and
is that something that is doable in your context, Lanoka and Yusefa? In Indonesia, for example, is that something that can be done?
I think in my context, because I teach in university level, it's rather flexible, Pak Willy, but I think maybe it's rather challenging if teachers from primary schools, because they are bounded by the curriculum and they have limited time. I think that's rather challenging. But do you have any other tips for maybe teachers who teach in junior and senior high schools, because the time is very limited and the materials are firm?
Yes, I was actually thinking about integrating extensive reading in your normal lessons. What I mean is this: for example, if you teach young children, I mean, one excellent way to teach young children is through stories.
Yes.
So the teacher can tell the story orally, and the teacher can provide excellent reading materials for the students to read, either before or during class, and then eventually they'll assess on their, some kind of test performance. So this is an indirect way of adding the quantity of reading in the teacher's normal classroom. Right. For the higher level, for example, high school students may be required to do some writing. Now, writing is an excellent way for teachers to include a lot of reading. Before you can write well, you need to read a lot. So the teachers then can provide a lot of reading materials, relevant, easy reading materials related to the topic that the students will be writing. So we can see here the link between reading and writing within a normal language classroom. I think that is one way to integrate, but also to help deal with the tricky issue of assessing extensive reading. But having said that, it's always good to have this school-wide or college-wide extensive reading program, because that is one of the surest way that the students will read in quantity and get benefit from their reading.
But another thing is that in junior or senior high schools, teachers have to also follow the textbooks, right?
Yes.
The English textbooks. Then, so how do you think teachers can connect between extensive reading and the textbook content?
Good question. Let me tell you of what I learned from a high school teacher in Korea. This is not my own experience. It was a teacher, high school English teacher in Korea. Now, one time I was in Korea and I did a workshop on extensive reading. And this particular teacher was in that reading, or in that workshop. I came back to Korea a couple years later, invited back and gave a talk. And after that, this teacher came to see me. And she told me what she did. She said that my workshop inspired her to do extensive reading. So what she did was, with her own money, buy a bunch of graded readers. And then in Korea, in both middle school and high school, there is a half-an-hour homeroom period before the regular school hours begin. So in her homeroom half-an-hour period, she did extensive reading. She gave the books, students chose them, they read them. And then she told me, she's telling me all this, right? And she told me that one student came up to her after class and said that she really liked this book. Could she take it home and read it? And what did the teacher say? Of course, yeah. Sure. So students started taking the books home and reading them. Now, there was one girl who took a book home and was reading it at home. And the girl's mother said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm reading a book." She said, "But that's English." She said, "Yes, I like it." And the mother got very proud. And her neighbor had a daughter, same age, who was in a different homeroom in the same high school. So she went to that mother and said, "My daughter brings home books in English and reads them. Does yours?" Knowing the answer, right? And so this mother, the second mother, got very upset because the other mother's child was doing something that her daughter wasn't doing. So she went to the high school and got an appointment with the principal and then hollered at the principal, "My daughter, that daughter's doing this. What's happening?" And of course, the principal didn't know anything about this, right? Because the teacher did her own. So he went to see this teacher and said, "What are you doing?" And she explained it, and the principal got very interested and sat in on the homeroom period and saw what was happening. And he got so excited that he made it obligatory for all of the middle school's homeroom periods, bought books, and gave that teacher her money back. And she told me this story.
Wow.
So there you are. So, there are different ways of putting extensive reading in practice.
So, yeah.
I had no idea of putting it in a homeroom period, right?
If you want something radical, I mean, I've heard people, saying this. Throw away the course books, because the course books are not going to be particularly useful for students, especially those learning English as a foreign language. So right. Instead of course books, replace the course books with reading materials. Close the door. Close your classroom door. Don't let anyone, see your classroom. So do whatever, you believe is useful for your students. But something that is important for you to remember is that at the end of the year, you have to be able to show to everyone, to the school, to the teachers, and to the principals that extensive reading actually works, and it does improve students' English language proficiency, as shown in their test results, which I believe, will happen if the students do read a lot in the classroom. Throw away the course books.
Wow, those are definitely great and useful tips, I think, and it's free. And so, I think there is a very strong message here that teachers also have to take actions when they want to see changes in the classroom, right?
Right.
So they have to take risks and also actions to find better strategies in teaching reading. I mean, it doesn't only have to be in the textbook, but maybe then we can go out a little bit and then implement extensive reading and close the door. I think I agree with that.
I like that. Close the door.
I've got one burning question for you, Richard.
Okay.
Yes, the link between reading and writing. We know it's there, but many have complained and said to me that, hey, my kids read a lot, but their writing doesn't seem to improve a great deal. Now, this is particularly true when these kids are writing something that is more academic in nature.
Yes.
These kids continue to have a difficult time writing, formal pieces of writing. What would be your advice? Is there anything else besides reading that kids need to do or that teachers can do to help bridge the gap between reading and writing?
Well, good question. And I myself have not done any particular research on academic writing and reading. But we all know, for most cultures anyway, I know that good writers read. So there is that link in L1 and I'm sure L2. So in the book that Julian and I did, the extensive reading activities, is a section on writing activities. And I think teachers were to use those writing activities and the students became really good at doing that, it might influence the more academic writing. That's my guess. Yeah.
So the advice is
really good. And when I've done these writing activities, for example, when I was doing it in that Japanese class I was telling you about it, and this was at a lower level, of course, it wasn't academic writing, but the students really got into writing in Japanese. It seemed to work well. Yeah. For example, one of the activities that they really liked was writing an email to one of the principal characters. Because that's what they do. Everyone writes emails, right?
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Once I read a book by Michael Lacey Freeman. The title is Egghead, and I think the book wins the LLL in Extensive Reading World Congress in Japan last time. And after reading that book with my students, I asked my students to write an email. Actually, it's a letter. It's a letter, to Michael Lacey Freeman. Like they can express their feeling related to the book, or they can even ask questions like about Michael's imaginary friends and so on. And then I scanned the letter and then I sent it to Michael. And then Michael did really reply. Did really reply the letter. And also we have a Skype video call. And then my students read the letter to him, and then he answered the questions directly to my students.
That's a great story.
Yeah, it was such an experience for the students too, and that motivated them to read more.
Definitely, really good, really good.
Wow, it has been a wonderful session with the two of you. I still feel like I'm dreaming right now. I often meet Dr. Willy Renandya, even though he is always special to me. But
in your dream or in?
But I cannot believe I can meet Professor Richard Day today.
My pleasure. It's been so nice talking to the two of you and seeing Willy was my former student years ago.
Actually,
30 years ago.
Actually, we do have that one question before. Actually, we want to know, like, how did actually Dr. Willy Renandya meet Professor Richard Day for the first time? I mean, like, we are curious about this non-academic story of you two meeting in the past.
Well, we met in an academic context. I was a student, a graduate student back then. And I took his course, one of the best courses that I've taken in my life. He was so inspiring. He was so generous, actually, with the way he graded my paper.
But like, did you have a chance to hang out with Professor Richard Day outside of the classroom? Dr. Willy Renandya?
I remember once we had dinner in your place, Richard, with Jack Richards. We had,
Yes.
a very pleasant, evening
Yes.
with him and Jack Richards and some students. Oh, his
Yeah.
house
Yes.
is beautiful. It's located on top of the small hill overlooking the sea
Oh,
and the
here.
city. Yeah,
Hang on. Just a second.
beautiful house. Yes.
I'm going to,
Show.
yes, I'm going to, how do I get out of my virtual background? Oh, I go none, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's your house now.
Okay, now, here is my house, and over here is part of it.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to unplug my laptop and go out onto the lanai, and you can see what
Oh,
I'm talking
the
about.
lanai. Lanai is veranda.
Yeah, this is the lanai.
The what, Pak
Oh,
Willy?
that's nice.
Okay.
It's
And
the
then
Hawaiian
over
word
here
lanai.
is where this is the valley that Willy's talking about.
Oh,
Yes,
wow.
it's beautiful.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Okay, and there's the ocean. Can you see it?
Mm. Yes, we can.
Can I visit you next summer, Professor Richard?
Sure, sure.
Yes.
Okay.
The three of us, Richard.
Sure.
Yes, yes, good. Good idea.
Very nice
Good
place
idea.
to live. Yes. I think
Yes, thank you. Thank
it's
you.
a nice
Yeah,
place to
and-
read
and-
too.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't mind to stay at home because of COVID or whatever it is. I have that kind of view.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay, okay.
Well,
good.
after my studies at the University of Hawaii, I kept in touch with Richard,
Yes,
and we met
yeah.
actually several times in
Yes.
conferences, mostly in Korea, in Thailand, and in some other places. So it's been a great friend and colleague and former professor as well.
Yes, yeah, good.
Yeah.
And my pleasure. Okay, good.
Okay.
Well,
Mhm. So it's been a very beautiful day for me, and I believe it's for Bu Yusefa too, because we still can't believe that today we are having a special day talking to Professor Richard Day and Dr. Willy Renandya. We are happy beyond measure, but I think we need to end our session. But before we end our session, there are 3 trivia questions for both of you. So I will start. So please answer quickly without thinking. So
Answer quickly without thinking.
Yes.
This is a trick question.
So Dr. Willy Renandya, one word about Professor Richard Day, please.
Inspirational. One of the best teachers that I've had in my life.
And then Professor Richard Day, one word about Dr. Willy Renandya.
curious. He has a great curiosity and he works hard to satisfy that curiosity, right? And that keeps him making solid contributions to our field.
Okay, next question for Professor Richard Day. Your favorite fiction?
I enjoy spy novels, you know, espionage, thrillers, that sort of thing. I really enjoy that, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Dr. Willy Renandya, what about you? Your favorite fiction?
Same as Richard. I remember when we were in Korea, you gave me a book that you just finished reading by the author is Lee Child or something.
Yes, Lee Child.
Lee Child, yes.
Yes.
It's a thriller, and I read the book after you did, and it was a great book. So spy stories, thrillers, whodunit type
Yes,
stories.
yeah.
But more recently, I'm very much into nonfiction actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
things that help you reflect on life
Good.
and what it means. You know, this is what happens when people are getting a little bit older.
Just a little bit. Dr.
Are
Willy.
you old, Pak Willy? You're not old.
I'm not old, but I'm not young either. So.
Okay, so the last question, Professor Richard Day, what's your favorite spot to read?
My favorite book?
Your
Spot.
favorite spot?
Sport. My favorite sport.
Place.
No. Your favorite
Place.
spot, favorite place to read.
Oh, I'll show you. Here we go. I'm now going into the living room. This is the living room right here. Okay. And here is the chair that I like to read in right here.
Oh, wow.
It's a kind of a rocking chair. Okay, and so this is where I like to read. And guess what, Willie? Here's the book I'm just finishing now.
Oh, another Lee child.
Lee Child. Yes, it's
Jack
called
Reed,
Personal. Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So this is where I hang out and do my reading. Okay. Right in here. Good question. Yeah. Okay.
The
I'll
rocking
show
chair.
you the book that I'm reading now. I don't know if you can see this.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's a bit hard to see.
Late bloomers.
Yes, it's an excellent book, especially for younger people who have not bloomed yet. Because it is never, yes, the key message of the book is it's never too late to bloom. Because some people bloom early in their life and some people bloom much, much later. And I
Right.
belong to the second category of late bloomers.
I'm gonna have to get that book. Yeah. Good.
Very, very nice book.
Late bloomers. Okay.
Late bloomers. Excellent book. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Pak Willy, what about you? What is your favorite spot to read?
In my bedroom, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
When I'm on the bus, when I'm traveling, I enjoy reading books when I'm traveling. On the plane, on the bus, the train, and those places.
Okay.
It's really
Good
fun.
question. Good questions. Good.
Yeah. Thank you for the answers, Professor Richard and Dr. Willy.
Okay. Good
Yeah,
enough.
and thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your time.
Okay.
But I think this is the end of our session today. We hope that we are able to have more discussion about extensive reading with you in the future.
I hope so. I look forward to it. And as we say in Hawaii, aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha and
Aloha.
hello, Richard.
Okay. Take care.
Okay.
And also
Bye.
thank you to all the audience who are also with us today. We will see you again next week. Happy Saturday night.
Good. Yes.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.